NFL Top 100 on NFL Network, with Tyreek Hill being 1 and Mahomes 4. Do you agree with that ordering of events, Jason?
I mean, well, as soon as you see a list and you see Mahomes is at 4, it kind of just taints the list. Mahomes, I think, should be number 1. That doesn't mean Tyreek Hill isn't deserving to be all the way up there in the top. If you want to put him at 2, put him at 2. What I love when this list comes out is I just love all the controversy that surrounds it. Jalen Johnson took a shot at Aaron Rodgers. He called a stray because he was 92 on the list and he didn't play. And through my experiences in the league, the NFL Top 100 was always a mixed bag of how guys felt, because they'd come around, you'd have the sheets where you had to put your 20 players on it. And I remember one year, Jacksonville, the people came in there like Jacksonville. They did an awesome job. They filled out every sheet they were on. That year, Jacksonville had about 8 guys in the top 100. So there's always some conversations that always surrounds it. But, I mean, Tyreek Hill has been unbelievable since getting in Miami. But with Patrick Mahomes, I mean, back-to-back Super Bowls, you cannot not have that guy as the number 1 player.
But again, what we were discussing at the top, because, Jason, you know me, you know what I like to stand for here is to add a little nuance to it as well. The voting takes place mostly during the playing season, though, right? Before the playoffs,
yeah.
Correct?
Yeah.
And last year, Tyreek, right up until December, was red hot, with the exception of that game against the Chiefs when we had the ball ripped away from him. Mm-hmm. I think it was by Snead and then or McDuffie. At any rate, long story short is that led to the eventual go-ahead or game-winning score. He was on fire and Mahomes was not. Does that really matter? Is there a nuanced thought by voters in their heads about the current, or do you look at the whole scope of everything where you would think Mahomes would be 1, right?
I mean, without a doubt, there is a nuance to it, because during the regular season, we talked about the Chiefs offense. You remember the December game where they're playing against the Las Vegas Raiders, and they give up 2 touchdowns on offense. I think it was a pick 6 and a forced fumble that got picked up and a touchdown. So you got to put yourself, I guess, in the position of those guys. If that's the time that they're coming into your locker room and you're watching the Chiefs, you may not disrespect the Chiefs, but you're like, hey, realistically, this season, Mahomes isn't having his best season. But at the end of the day, I think what we found out is you just don't go against that guy. And I think that's one of those things that they redid the list at the end of the season. You talk about it with the NBA all the time, too, is an MVP will come out during the regular season and someone catches fire and takes off in the playoffs, and they're hoisting the trophy at the end of the NBA champions. And you're like, well, maybe the same thing was the MVP this year with Lamar Jackson. We saw the season that Patrick Mahomes ended up finishing with, but that didn't take away from Lamar. So I think it's one of those tough things, but the list comes out now. And for everybody looking at a list that includes football players and you're saying the top 100 of them, and Patrick Mahomes isn't as number 1, if you got to put an asterisk and say when the voting was, it just takes away from the list.
Yeah, I know that. And again, not much nuance or gray area when somebody can use something to fuel their fire, right, Jason? And you've been around some greats in your 13 years of playing. Do you got a good story of being around somebody where you couldn't believe a teammate of yours, or even if it's you, utilized something that seemed off or weird or maybe not factual to fuel their fire? You got a story like that from anybody?
I feel like that was Julian Edelman every single week. I feel like when we were playing with him, and he was the type of guy that at the end of practice, you bring it up in the huddle, especially on that team. Brady may speak, Matthew Slater may speak, my brother Devin McCourty would speak. But whenever Jules got in the front and he was getting ready to say something, it was just like everybody was all ears, because you didn't know what direction this thing was going to go in. He was the one right after Bill's talking, and Bill would hype up whatever team we were playing. They could have 2 wins on the season. He's talking about how good of a football team. And then Jules would come up right after and be like, all right, this is a trap game, boys. And you're just like, well, Bill just said they're good. Now you're saying we're in a trap game. We're playing against a poor team. Jules was that guy that no matter what, he'd be going against a practice squad guy, and he'd be in a pushing and a shoving match because the practice squad guys had talked some trash to him on something that happened. So he was a guy that no matter what, he found something to motivate him. He was probably still pissed off from playing football with the golden flashes of being a quarterback to now being a receiver of what people said coming out from the draft. So he was a fun guy to compete against every single day because you didn't know what type of mood he was going to be in.
Whatever makes you great, right, Jason? Whatever.
No doubt about it.
Without
no doubt about it.
Jason McCourty of CBS here on the Rich Eisen Show. So, obviously CBS is predominantly on the AFC side of the ball. What are your thoughts on the Chiefs entering this three-peat campaign and potentially being better? What do you think about that idea here?
And it's crazy, as you say, potentially being better because defense, they lost some guys, specifically L'Jarius Sneed in that secondary that I think somebody's going to have to step up and take over because what he did on the defensive side of the ball, shutting receivers down last year, was unbelievable. But when you flip it over and you look at the offense, and we're in that era now in training camp where we're always seeing the clips that come out. Xavier Worthy is running down the field and it's a 50-yard bomb. Then Hollywood Brown is running down the field and it's another bomb from Mahomes as he's rolling out to his left. So you watch what they were able to do last year. And now coming back, where now you've equipped Patrick Mahomes with more weapons and more speed to get down the field. And a guy like Travis Kelce, who's been obviously the best tight end in the NFL for however long now you've just created more space on the offensive side of the ball for him to be able to work as he's getting older in his career. So I look at the Chiefs, and they're the team to beat in the AFC. You can talk about Lamar Jackson, you can talk about him adding Derrick Henry, you can talk about Joe Burrow being healthy and all these different guys in the AFC, which is going to be fun to watch. But when you're the king, you're the king. And that's Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs this upcoming season, because they proved to us last year that having less on offense, when it came down to it in the playoffs, going on the road in Baltimore, they were able to win that game on the play of Mahomes and what he was able to do. Mecole Hardman caught the touchdown pass to win the Super Bowl. I don't think anybody was thinking that was going to happen as we watched them fall apart against the Raiders on Christmas Day, and they still found a way to come up victorious.
That's why he's the number one player in the NFL, right, Jason?
Hey, you said it.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.